Everyone loves a good rags to riches story. It's a story usually of an orphan with absolutely nothing, who somehow through an adventure, either by marrying a prince or princess, using sheer wits, or just a story about someone whose hard work paid off, suddenly becomes rich. These stories make us feel good. They make us feel like even though things are crappy right now, if we just work harder and keep our heads up, we too will someday be rich. And that is why these stories persist so much. You rarely hear stories extolling the middle-class laborer these days. It's either rich or poor. However, would a rags to riches story really be a good thing? If one started out with nothing and then was given everything, one would think they would be more frugal, more giving, and more careful with their money. Sadly, that's not the case. It's interesting to just look at celebrities. The study of fallen pop deities is a fascinating one. Most of them rose to fame ridiculously quickly. For a bit, they were absolutely loved by everyone. Then they began their downward spiral of depression, drugs, and either suicide or reality TV shows. But what about people who didn't get rich through fame? In studying my family and talking on that rare occasion with my very extended family, I came from a family of backstabbers. From the stories I've heard, our family started out as a normal Midwest farming family, but in the early 1900s, the military wanted to buy land to build a base. The amount they were paid was quite a lot. These were simple farming folk who had grown up on the land. Suddenly they were rich and living in a completely different world. At almost the onset of their new lives, they began a power grab game with each other, each one trying to get the biggest piece of the pie. There were probably around 11 to 12 children, so you can imagine this got messy and bitter. My dad ended up getting cut out of his inheritance entirely by one of his uncles after his parents died. Because of this, I really don't know anyone on my father's side of the family. However, I have run into one or two of my third cousins, and apparently it's kind of a common theme among the rest of the family too. What was once a simple and probably loving family is now a scattered group of either strangers or enemies. Winning the lottery tends to show the same pattern. They win and they think their new life will be so much better, and then they end up having more relatives show up than they ever knew existed. Just like celebrities, they are suddenly surrounded by fake friends who would betray them at a moment's notice if they thought it would benefit them. No one likes Paris Hilton or Britney Spears for who they are, but for what they have. They are no longer people, just expensive animals that may be manipulated into laying a golden egg for someone. Why do so many of these real rags to riches end up so awful as opposed to the simplistic stories we love to hear with the happily ever after ending? Much of it comes down to the lack of education and, more importantly, the lack of self-awareness. Simple farmers wouldn't understand the first thing about the psychology of greed and how dopamine makes them so addicted to money and possessions that they would stab their friend in the back. Most people who became rich spent all their life trying to get rich, never decided what they would do if they actually got rich. It's like a dog who actually caught a car. What the hell does he actually do with it now that he finally has one? Well, do what we all do in a new setting. We emulate our peers. Sadly for the rich, their peers are some of the worst people to emulate, and they have all come from a history of wealth and greed, or they themselves have gotten their money in a rags to riches style and also have no idea what to do with it. One big problem with the poor becoming even just well off with insufficient self-reflection is the method they raise their kids. I've heard case after case of depressionites who went through hell and made certain that their children would have all the things they didn't get to have, and boy did they. The child lived like a king or queen or even a god. The child got everything he or she wanted. They never were told no and never learned the value of a dollar and hard work. These children usually ended up self-centered with self-destructive habits because they knew someone is always there to bail them out. If their parents ended up dying or cut off support, then they'd find a spouse that will be that parent for them that they can leech off of. This never being told no is the biggest problem with celebrities, and they pattern this behavior a lot. Many rich kids end up blowing their inheritance, and it is only the ones who are able to perpetuate the idea of greed or the work needed to make money that succeed quite well. Michael Jackson is a perfect example of what happens when someone has so much money they can no longer be told no. This power trip and exemptions from the rules and laws of the land is exactly why the rich think it's perfectly fine to dump toxins, pour smoke, and spread information about climate change. They know they will get away with it as they can just buy some politicians if they need to. So how does one get rich? Hard work and intelligence? Well, these can certainly increase your chances slightly, but the smartest and or hardworking people are at best middle class. If you listen to the Republican ideal of the American dream, you would think that that's what all rich people have in common. The rich actually only become rich for 3 reasons: luck, gaming the system, or being the recognized sperm or egg of another rich person. All people who are rich from hard work either got it that way from being in the right place at the right time, or by bending the law and breaking ethics to get rich. More often than not, a mix of both. If hard work and intelligence were all it took, then scientists would be some of the richest people on the planet. Instead, they make pennies compared to lawyers and giant CEOs. 25% of all income in the US is going to the top 1% of Americans, most of them CEOs. A recent British survey studied the amount of happiness per household income. The happiest people in Britain, on average, made £50,000 per year. This translates to $75,000. As you went under or over the mark, the happiness steadily dropped. America, of course, might need to add about 25 to 50,000 grand, as we do not have free education or health care. With this sweet spot of happiness in income range, you feel safe. All your needs are met. You're doing something that makes you feel like you're a contributing member of society, and your services and work are valuable. You have the money to travel if you want, to take risks if you want, such as starting up a new business. You can try and fail if you need to, and you do not need to fear how your children will get the same opportunities you do. You are also respected for who you are, and not for what you own. You also have plenty to give to others or charities. This is why the middle class is so important. But it is rapidly vanishing. The right wing likes to spin taxing the rich as punishing success. However, as everyone has a right to pursue happiness, then success is not being rich, but more being middle class. The lack of happiness and destructive tendencies of very rich people might just classify being too wealthy as a psychological disorder. It's like an addiction to power and a hoarding syndrome, acquiring money you and your offspring will never spend while wasting it on stuff you will never use or enjoy while others starve. Another study showed that money can only bring you happiness in 2 ways. 1, by giving it away, and 2, by knowing you make more than people around you. Guess which one most of the rich are going for? Bill Gates is enjoying double the happiness of the average rich person. On top of that, as a philanthropist, you can help repair your image and legacy you might have damaged by actually acquiring that wealth, while still being ridiculously rich. Some of the most horrible, law-breaking plutocrats have been the biggest philanthropists, patronizingly recreating their legacy on the lives they destroyed.